Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles to the Angelo Robles Podcast. I'm also the founder and CEO at Family Office Association. I'm so fortunate practically every day, and yes, that's fortunate, to interview some of the most amazing people in the world, mainly for my own curiosity and interest, but to give you a little bit of context behind who I am and who we are, and a lot of my conversations, I help global families and their family offices solve problems, procure positive future outcomes, and prepare for intergenerational necessity. It's vital for families and their family offices to understand their vulnerabilities and become more resilient so they can mitigate risk and prevail during times of crisis. We have a very special guest on today. He was a smashing success when we had him on back in the early summer about effectively being a high-performing family. And we recommend, if you didn't hear that, whether a podcast or watch it during YouTube, you look it up or simply send me an email. I'm happy to send you the link. Today, we're going to be talking about building your family business during these tough times. We're also going to cover, because it goes together, how to support your children and your family business now and always, and strengthening your family connections as the COVID crisis continues. I'm going to give a little bit more context to what we're going to discuss today. In the best of times, it's safe to say that all our families want to be high-performing families and create lasting legacies from one generation to the next. Not all families are able to achieve this intention. Up to 90% of families lose their wealth by the third generation. Nearly 90% of all family businesses also disappear by the third generation. After all, money alone does not bring happiness to the family leaders or their next-gen children. Well, things aren't fine right now, let alone optimal or best, for many families as these COVID conditions continue and the global pandemic spreads around the world at unprecedented levels. Countless family leaders, and especially family businesses and family office leaders, are struggling to get out of bed each and every day. So what we do with the information we are receiving on a daily and sometimes hourly basis can be downright debilitating. How do we stay positive and keep moving forward rather than get stuck in the dark and seemingly hopeless place? Today, we're going to review some powerful and inspiring examples of how we can bring our families together as the COVID crisis continues. We'll share valuable approaches for building our family businesses during these tough times, as well as discuss how to best bring our children into our family business and develop them as next generation leaders. Is your family a high-performing family? Do you want it to be? During this intimate conversation, an expert in leadership and family business psychology will help you transform your family into a high-performing family and strengthen your family connections. With that overview, I'd like to welcome Family Legacy First President and CEO, Dr. Jeremy Lurey, to our program. With over 25 years experience, Jeremy has served clients ranging from families of significant wealth to mid-market companies to Fortune 500 corporations. With passion for helping families transition their business and transfer their wealth to the next generation, he regularly facilitates family retreats, drafts family charters, and provides family counseling to both parents and their children. He also designs executive coaching programs for family business leaders to develop the presence and skills required to succeed in their current roles and be promoted to the next level. Today, Dr. Lurey will guide us through establishing the family governance required to create more sustainable, high-performing, multi-generational families and futures, and create a happier, healthier, and more productive family experience. Jeremy, it's great to have you back. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Angelo. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we set quite a high bar there in terms of what we're going to be able to cover today. I'm excited. Like I said, if nothing else, I'm just curious. And for me to learn from you and the great work that you've been doing for so long and what I could impart to my relationships that both listen and those that I work with is very, very valuable. let's take a little bit of a step back. It was mentioned a bit in the open relative to a big part of our discussion from a couple of months ago. But I think that's important to set the stage because I don't think I know any family that doesn't strive. They may not do all the steps, but in their mind, they want to be high performing. So in your experience working with successful families, Jeremy, what are the key elements that distinguish a high performing family from others?
I think that's an important place to start, Angelo. And I share all the time. I would not consider my family a high performance family as I go through some of the distinctions here. I think we're a great family. I think in many ways we are a close family, and we even contribute to our communities, philanthropies, and charities of importance to us. But that does not necessarily make us a high performance family. So before any of your members or especially listeners start to worry that I'm criticizing, I'm not. We've created a model earlier this year, working with a significant family, just trying to look at what makes a successful family from generation to generation. What are those key elements? And it starts with the family business. In many cases, your members have already exited their operating companies, so maybe they're invested in real estate or other, investment strategies. So it may not be a true operating company as a business. It could be the family office, but really, how does the family make money, right? And how do they support themselves? And we want that to be an effective organization where it is truly a family business. Are we engaging key employees in that business and retaining our top talent? Are we growing that business to achieve its full potential? We look at things like, top line revenue and bottom line, what's our net income? And is it driving the EBITDA that we need as a family to thrive, not just survive? And so we can get more into that a little bit later in the discussion. The business, though, in and of itself is an entity, but in our families, we use it to drive our family relationships. And how does the family stay connected? So does it support us? Do we have the lifestyle that we want? But more than that, between homes and cars and yachts and what have you, is our family connected? Do we have the emotional bonds? And do we get together beyond just holidays or vacation time? But really, do we support each other as a family? Then we can talk more about relationships, especially during these tough times of how do we stay connected as a family. And then the third piece, the final pillar, really is back to philanthropy. So our business generates money for our family. It brings us together in certain ways. The philanthropy is a unique piece that really has that opportunity to strengthen our ties. And whether we're all committed to solving problems like world hunger, or we want to just support our local community with homelessness, it doesn't matter really what the cause is, but the point is that we use that as a way to come together and support the communities in which we live and for the world around us. So it's sort of those three elements. We talk about generation to generation. So having a successful family in one generation does not make it a high performance multi-generational family. And obviously that's what many of us strive for, is that legacy effect, so that our families do not lose our wealth within 3 generations. So we do not lose our family businesses, within those 3 generations.
Yeah, there's so many questions to ask. Why don't I begin a little bit following up from that? Because there's lots to digest there. As what I would describe as a CEO coach and trusted business advisor, what do you recommend for family business owners to improve performance and generate greater value in their operating companies? And I might add, their family offices. Then we'll probably weave in the fact that our world is turned upside down during COVID. But how do we not complain about that? How do we look at the silver linings and get even better?
Absolutely. Thanks. And so I do distinguish the family office in a little bit here, but I want to speak to them sort of collectively, because the family office is in and of itself, it's a business. It's an organization similar to what our operating companies may be, our family businesses. On the business side, if you truly have an operating company, $10 million business, $200 million business, doesn't matter. I always share with folks this belief that we are always in the market to sell. Think about your own home. You've lived there for several years. You maybe have children who leave their socks on the floor, maybe don't make their beds every day. We're not really preparing our home for the real estate brokers to walk through every day to sell that home. Our businesses are the same way. If we were acting as if we were going to sell every day, we'd be looking to improve performance. We'd be looking to improve bottom line profitability so that we could go sell it on the open market. So how do we do that? We get the right employees on board, right? Jim Collins has a great book, Good to Great. We want the right people in the right seats on the bus. We want our employees to act like owners, so empower them, have them committed to the success of business, not just pulling a paycheck every couple of weeks. There's a lot more we can do around business operations and performance to improve that bottom line, but really in these tough times, I'd offer the word resilience. Many of the leaders that I support need to find that resilience to get out of bed every day, go to work, put one foot in front of the other, and really think about the future. So it's about being strategically focused. You know, I happen to be staying in New York today for some clients. I've got a lighthouse above me here. I'm a huge fan of the lighthouse. I think it's a great metaphor for leadership. If you know where your lighthouse is, you're more likely to achieve that destination and continue to hit the mark. And so on the business side, really it's about improving performance, trying to make our businesses sort of market ready to sell, because at any point we may want to. If we pull in the family office to discussion, you know, now we're talking about the investment portfolio and is it diversified properly? Again, if you were to think about selling it as an asset, what would you want it to look like? Do you have the right family officers involved? Do you have a director running it if it's a single family office, or have you outsourced from that to a multifamily office? So again, it's still about efficiency. It's about getting the right talent involved to lead specific tasks. So we can definitely talk about both the family office and the family business.
Yeah, there certainly are areas where, of course, they cross over, but there are nuances and differences. And whether a family business or a family office, and I want to be as quantifiable as I could, because you can't improve what you can't measure. But the reality is, a lot of it is communication, how I feel, and it is qualitative. And that's the combination of art and science that makes it so hard, and why most everyone could use some outside guidance and advice. It's complex. There's a reason why, even though these are incredibly smart families, often wonderful investing families, yet why? Why does it seem to fall apart after a couple of generations? And to blame it on investing or taxes, that could be a part of it, but you could plan for that. It's much deeper than that. To me, a lot of this comes down to, and I don't think I could talk about this enough, so since we're on this topic, let's stay on it, and that effectively is governance, which very simply is how decisions are made. We spoke a little bit about this in our first podcast together a couple of months ago. By far, the easiest in a family business or family office is the dictator model, because it's easy. I'm the founder, I'm the wealth creator, I make all the decisions, I can move very quickly, and of course I know better than everyone else. The problem with that is it's not inclusive, it's not engaging, it's too siloed in your thinking relative to around quote unquote you, and there's practically no way, I've seen it, that is not going to work with the next generation. They're going to try to do that with the oldest child, and the others will completely rebel, or they can't wait until they're in position to be an authority, and they're going to fragment and go in different directions. Talk a little bit about the importance of governance, making decisions, and arguably even setting a long-term vision and mission and being inclusive with the younger family members active in the family business or family office.
Absolutely. And you alluded to this, Angelo, that dictatorship model worked for the baby boomer founder who started the business 40 years ago. And he or she was the only one who knew how to run the company, right? They come out of a big corporate setting with this great idea, maybe some investment to get started. And so that single model works when you are the founder. It doesn't work at the next generations. And by the way, you and I both know families that are third, fourth, fifth generation. And so at some point you have multiple children, multiple branches with cousins. And so we need to find a way for shared governance, not just that more, dictatorial top-down approach. And so the families that I work with, we regularly talk about building our family charter, which is that governing document for the family. We can apply it to the family business. For example, is it a legacy business and is our intention to pass it down to the next generation? Or is it simply a wealth generation vehicle, in which case we may sell it at some point, we may exit. So these are all guidelines that we put into the charter or the governing documents. Some call it a family constitution. If you're specifically talking about your business, you might call it a strategic plan or a business plan. So without getting to semantics, it really is about who's involved, who are those key leaders, whether family, bloodline, or potentially your senior executives. How do they contribute to the decision-making process? How far out are we looking? 30 days? Maybe at the beginning of COVID conditions, people had to really do that, but hopefully we're looking 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years down the road. There's a great, body of knowledge out there around being multi-generational and future focused, where it's not just about my generation, my leadership, it's about the next generation and the next, leaders that we're bringing up. So that means getting our family involved sooner rather than later, talking about what matters most and what our core values are in the business or the family office. For example, some families might have no problem investing in oil and gas. Other families would never consider that. They only do impact investing where they're doing, good for their communities. And so these are all decision points we want to make sure that the family is aligned around, and where we have shared leadership between generations, especially, but even within generations with siblings and cousins, that everyone is aligned around those, key guidelines for making those strategic choices.
I'm just going from my deep, I guess you could say, experiences in many years in this community, and we're all on board. It kind of starts internally with reflection, with governance. In my opinion, the family constitution, the charter, as you call it, setting a vision and mission. I am the biggest believer in that. The challenge that I sometimes see is everyone knows it and they agree that we need to move forward and do it. And then it's done. There's like a relief that it's done. Not only is it often not updated, it's not really followed. And partially because people felt like they were forced into it. They weren't active contributors. How do you make everyone feel engaged by that process? And the fact that things do change and it may need to be updated. How do you go through that? The more important part of it is how do you get people to be engaged by it?
I think you're right that many people consider it a check the box task initially because they don't know what they don't know. They get into it because they hear it's a good idea, or maybe they're trying to address some family challenges. And so we create this charter at a moment in time based on current leadership, which could be your first gen, it could be your third gen, whomever is in charge of the estate or the family business. And then we typically roll it out through some kind of a family retreat. I've got one family right now, we finished their charter end of last year into the beginning of this year. Due to COVID conditions, we keep not being able to have the retreat. So it's still just sort of sitting on a shelf, if you will, which is a whole other problem people are facing this year. But as far as getting past the one and done experience, people just need to live with it. It is a living, breathing document, no different than a family member is a living, breathing human being. And whether there's another marriage or a divorce, a birth or a death, those are sort of life event triggers to maybe go back to the charter. Beyond that, though, in the business, I've an industry of clients that I work with, valuations are through the roof right now. And so more and more family businesses are looking to sell because they can exit and then, allocate that investment into a whole diverse portfolio of assets other than the main operating company. So do we need to go back to the charter and see what our governance was around that? Or do we need to rewrite our charter? These are all sort of examples. But I have one client, I helped them develop their charter probably 3.5 years ago now. And they're three, brother, two sisters, so three sort of governing family members in the family council, as we call it. And to your point, they didn't use it when it came to the next gen coming into the family business and managing performance or supporting the direct supervisor with a family council member. And so some family members have thrived in the business, some have not and exited. Some come in for internship over the summer because mom or dad hires them and then they leave to do other things. So all of these are different experiences that the family can use as the foundation to revisit that charter and look at what they wrote in that moment in time. Because I guarantee you, more families than not, if we were to talk about what happened December of 2019 or February of 2020, they are likely in a different place right now in the midst of a global pandemic where it is worth going back and revisiting some of these conversations.
Very much so. And this probably takes you back to your training during school and psychology and your hands-on work. But a lot of people, and I didn't have that education, I learned this the hard way and through my experiences with families. a lot of it is kind of looking back, being an anthropologist. The fact that a lot of families and communities, it tends to be very tribal. So developing of leadership and culture, what is the culture, how married in changes that, and how often that could be good. So it doesn't, again, get too siloed. When you go back to your early training and how you implement it in family businesses and family offices, and again, we keep on emphasizing the word family, 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 because it is so important here. How does that tribal nature, I know it sounds like an antiquated word, but how does that interplay with all of this, and why is it important?
I would like to think I'm clear on what my father's values are and or what most important to him. I know where he generates, where he contributes his money. I know where he offers his time in the community. And so I can guess what is important, but we haven't documented it. We don't have a charter. So if he were to pass tomorrow and my children were to ask me the next day, what was most important to Papa? What did he stand for? Because we want to continue his legacy. I'd be guessing. And so when you talk about legacy with these families, that's where the charter is so powerful. Think about second, third, fourth generations later, never having met their grandparents or great grandparents. When you capture it now, you are creating this document that will hold the family's values, no different than a family crest may have 100 or 200 years ago. And it tells the story. And so again, it is sort of a moment in time rendering of what is important to family leadership today. We do want to include next gen children and cousins, nieces, nephews, all those different familiar relationships in the process, at least when we roll it out through a retreat. But then we do want to revisit it. And whether it's an annual retreat or a semi-annual retreat, whether it's at a life, changing event. But I think you hit on the head there, which is it can't simply be something we do once and then we leave it. We've got to include other people in reviewing this at different points. And whether it is the bloodline can only work in the business or in-laws and spouses can, whether it's children must go get outside work experience before they come into the family business or not. There are so many different criteria that we might want to include, ultimately capturing values and what's most important to our family in the business and especially in the family office.
When you're talking about the charter, very important constitution, I agree. And you mentioned family retreats. I think a challenge sometimes with the written documents, and again, sometimes the attorneys will be involved and they need to, they have their role. But having great legal documents, again, I've been doing this a long time, does absolutely not assure that your family is going to last 3 generations. It's top 10, maybe 2 or 3, maybe. It's not number 1. It's going to be the respect the family has for other family members and communication. But I go back to tribes. So what tribes used to do back in the day, and have we really changed that much, is storytelling. And I think that's a really important way. I don't know, people don't read as much anymore, in my opinion, but everyone loves to hear a story.
Totally agree. And there are all kinds of ways to capture that story now, whether it's in video, having a family portal online to save it for the future generations. But the retreat for me, it really is about communications. It is about storytelling. It's about sharing those experiences that matter most to me as an individual, as a father or a son or a husband, with my children, my wife, my parents in the room, and you could think of the multitude of relationships that we use. But it is about that story. The document captures that, and we can refer to it over time, but it's not the end all be all. I mean, I distinguish my PhD in psychology from my father's, law degree. You have other professional advisors who are investment managers, who are, certified financial planners, for example. I mean, all of these professions play a part in the process. But for me, the charter is not something we sign because we may end up in court one day. The charter is the beginning of capturing that story for a generation. And the retreat is the chance to really tell those stories in person and get grandchildren together with grandparents, cousins and nieces and nephews all together. I have clients where we've done the retreats and I asked them, what's most important to you? What do you miss about growing up in the household? And it was Sunday dinners, and telling the story about making pasta if it's an Italian family, or think about different ethnicities and their traditions for barbecue or Chinese or what have you. But it's that precious time that brings the families together. The charter is the foundation, it's the governing document, as you said, but it's the stories and it's the connection that really make the difference.
And I hate to bounce around, but it all kind of ties into the concept that we're talking about. And again, there's so much that goes wrong and why families don't last 3 generations. Taking it, again, a little deep into the field of psychology, you do have things that are executive function centric, our level of impulse control, the ability to stay calm under crisis, to make tough decisions and be more right than you're wrong. Just think of all the things that happen sometimes from making wrong decisions and areas pertaining to impulse control. You could have intra-family and outside of the family litigation. That's a major issue. Most marriages, like 52% end in divorce. And these are all things that impact the psychology of the family and sometimes literally their pocketbook as well, their money. How often do you get a little deep into the weeds in areas like how do you as a family enhance your executive function, make better decisions, have better impulse control? Is to some degree that cat already out of the bag once they're in their mid-20s?
Yes and no. I mean, I can go back to child development theory, which says that we're all pretty well cooked by the time we're 5 years old. And we can go to the, nature versus nurture conversation of, by our young childhood into teen years, sort of what's considered your first act in life, right? The educational years that are pretty formative. But for me, I believe it all can be relearned, right? Because it's an emotional response to something. I'm working with 2 brothers right now who are the 3rd generation co-presidents of their company. Their parents, 2nd generation ownership, would like to retire and sort of sail off into the sunset, but the 2 brothers can't get along. You put them in what you'd consider a boardroom, and they'll go at it for hours if we don't control the conversation. And so one of them is doing exactly what you're saying. It's impulse control. He is choosing to pick on his brother based on what happened 40 years ago, rather than being present to what is happening today. What does the other brother do? He gets defensive, he reacts, and he fights back. No different than he would have done 40 years ago today. And so there's not one professional advisor I ever talked to who doesn't say they're either jealous of my PhD in psychology or so glad they don't have my PhD in psychology, because all of these relationships are so emotionally charged and driven based on a lifetime of experiences. And so the executive functions you're talking about, we have to address them. Now, can you change someone? Can you teach an old dog new tricks? That's still debatable, but I will absolutely go there as an advisor, and I will call people out for what I see as sort of behaviors that are rooted in the past but not present. I will give people the feedback about being more present to what's happening today, and we try to address it sort of one step at a time, whether it's in the business, sort of using professional and functional tools, or if it is in actually the family with the relationship and communications.
And this is always a challenge in family businesses where the family grows in scale, generations go by, and it gets more successful. Sometimes more success could potentially lead to a powder keg and more problems. And that's going to be not every family member is going to be active in the business. Oh, but what a surprise. They may want income from the business or some level of benefit from being in the family that has the business upon certain points. Now, that is an area where legal documents and certain financial solutions, buy-sell agreements, life insurance, all of that could help. But again, I've seen this play out too many times. If you're just relying on that, trust me, things are going to go wrong, whether it's litigation or other problems. How do you deal with issues where, listen, yeah, the daughter's in the business, but the son isn't? But you're going to have to, if you want to have family harmony, have some type of makeup relative to that, even if it potentially is upon death. So I know you're not a financial planner or an attorney, although you come from an attorney family, but how do you weave in the complexity of what I just described and make everyone happy?
So I've learned enough to be dangerously knowledgeable, and I will leave it with that. And I always qualify any advice as not being legally sound or even, quite frankly, financially sound when it comes to the investment strategy. But from the psychology perspective and focusing on people and their relationships, I've got one client where The son's been in the business for 20 some odd years. He's president by title. Dad at 84 years old now is still the CEO, and said to me at one point, Jeremy, I'm not leaving the corner office till you put me in a coffin. So it's that kind of a person. But he was going to give 50% of the business to his daughter upon his death, even though she knows nothing about the business. Son and daughter are basically feuding and don't speak to each other. And I would much rather use a financial tool like life insurance to give her an equalizing payment, not ruin the business for the customers, not ruin the business for the employees, and not ruin the business for the son who's poured his sweat equity into this business for the last 20 some odd years. And so, I mean, I will at least comment on things like that and refer in the right specialist who can do that work. There are definitely buy-sell agreements and other legal documents that we can create to support this. But ultimately for me, I'd offer it's really back to the communications of what do we want? Is it a legacy business? If so, we need to find a way to develop our next generation to come into the business. And how do they do that? Do they need to have a college degree? Do they need to have 3 to 5 years work experience? Or will we take them out of high school, right? Do we give somebody a job because she is a struggling artist or he's a failed musician? And that is an opportunity within a family business or a family office. But I lean into both and, not either or. I know so many families that operate their businesses like families, not like businesses. Same is true for the family office. Give junior a seat in the corner and hope that he or she doesn't make a mess of things. Well, no, I don't see the family business or the family office as a birthright. I don't bring people in from a sense of entitlement. They need to earn it. And through their professional skills and capabilities, through their education and background, they either are well suited to be CFO or they aren't. I have clients where many of their children come in sweeping floors in the warehouse as job one, and only if they progress to management can they get a seat in the corner office. So many different ways to approach this. But really, if you want to talk about next gen leadership development, you want to talk about succession planning in a legacy environment, we really need to have that complete conversation, not just have a lawyer put together a buy-sell agreement or bring in a valuation expert to value each shares of the business.
For sure. Building upon what you just said, but my experiences are going to be more in the single family office community, and effectively, let's label it nepotism. So when I talk to successful non-family, I emphasize that single family office executives kind of off the record or in my research, what are one of the main things you looked at before you accepted the job in the family office? Or what do you find now challenging? A lot of times it comes down to, especially if they're talented and they have options, Angelo, if I look into the family office and I feel that the family is involved when they're not qualified, that doesn't mean that they can't be in charge. It's their family, that they can't be on the board, for sure. But when I see they're embedded in the family office, I'm sorry, I have other options. One, there's a variety of problems there. One of them is there are some non-family members that feel they're being a little bit spied upon. And sometimes they're kind of right about that. So we did a whole session in my podcast with Sven. I'm forgetting his last name, but he's been a non-family member executive in multiple big multi-billion-dollar European family offices. And, now he's an entrepreneur. But he talks about the 10 reasons why you probably don't want to work in a family office. And the number one thing was exactly what I just described. Overpromise and underdeliver, not having applicable employment contracts in place with clarity on bonuses. I mean, those were all a part of it. But the whole issue of nepotism, you're going to be more deeply steeped in the family business side of it, but that's going to transition and be the same problem in a family office as well. You mentioned a little bit about sweeping the floors as a way to work your way up and get around it. But I sometimes wonder in the family office if it's better off having a very clear dividing line. It's debatable.
And I would offer it comes back to defining roles and responsibilities clearly. It comes back to clear performance measures. You could, let's say that I'm your son, you could bring me into our family office and let's say it's $100 million estate. You can tell me, go make us more money. And if I invest in Google or Apple that happen to be doing well this year and I make more money, does that make me successful? And are you to give me a raise? I don't know. That's probably not the right measure of success than looking, at the long-term generational impact of what our family does. Have I learned more than just how to play the stock market? Have I learned about, the legal aspects of contracts and our real estate development and other things? And so a lot of people end up in the family office doing a thing or thinking, I just have to maintain our wealth or I just have to grow it a little bit. And that's what success looks like. And for some families, that may be okay. But I would offer there are so many other ways to look at impact on a society if we do some level of philanthropy. Looking at, are we doing the right deals if we are investing as opposed to just playing the stock market? And so, making a few more dollars is not necessarily how I want my next generation to participate in my family office. I want them to learn about our values, learn about, diversifying our portfolio, learn about managing through what have been some very volatile markets this year, because playing Apple or Zoom is not necessarily how we want to sustain ourselves as a family.
No, and correct. In the short term, being very concentrated from that investing perspective would have been a strategy that worked out well. So quantitatively, it's like, oh, it's above a benchmark, but the family is already rich. They want to mitigate risk. They want to hedge risk, and being that concentrated is not the way to do it. Now, might they want to be tactical and be a little bit long in that arena and be a little concentrated? Concentrated is how wealth is made. Diversity is how it's protected. But I would say you would want to take a little bit of profit off the table and hedge. And that's an example, again, of art and science, of quantitative and qualitative. You need to dig deeper, especially if you're going to be quantitative. It's deeper than just, and I know we're talking investing, but we're getting 17% and the benchmark is 12%. But what risk are you taking? It's a lot more complicated than that.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit positively about the next generation in the family business. And that's going to relate, in my example, to now. It's COVID-19. What was going to happen in technology in 5 or 10 years is like happening right now. Companies need to reinvent themselves so they could go, they're gone. I mean, I think I heard something. I don't know if it's 100% true, so don't hold me to it. But is the market cap or market value of Zoom greater than ExxonMobil? That's like hard to imagine. I mean, just times change and they change so quickly. So what could be an example of maybe a business that is getting a little old and stale would benefit from youth, new ideas, a new way of looking at problems, and maybe tech savviness to take it into the next level? When does the elder, as I call it, I know it sounds a little old fashioned, when do they know when to, I could use some fishing analogies, but to let the line run as opposed to reeling it in so quickly?
I go back to the lighthouse metaphor. Where are we going? If all we want to do is sustain ourselves today, what we did before is probably sufficient. But if we want to grow, if we want to expand into new markets, if we want to diversify and manage our risk, then we likely need to do things differently. What we did before, what got us here is not going to get us there. And so the use of digital marketing, for example, I was talking with a client this morning. The old way of doing things was telemarketing, cold calling, or sending postcards into people's homes. Well, that doesn't work today. And so if you're not on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, you're not going to get the eyeballs of your consumers. And so looking at consumer behavior and where are they basically doing their shopping is important. I don't expect someone who's later in life to know how to execute on that. They may have the aha moment that we want to grow by 10x over the next 5 years, and what we did before won't get us there. But it's going to be a millennial. It's going to be someone who's newer to the field to generate those kinds of out-of-the-box ideas and to help the company innovate. And so they're going to be a really good partnership between a baby boomer and a millennial, for example. It takes a strong millennial to have that voice internally to say, hey, what do you think about? Have you considered? And this goes right back to the family office. The example I gave before about impact investing, that wasn't here 25 years ago when the first generation made the money, but it is now. It's a very prominent strategy. Or I don't know, looking at opportunity zones is a great way of managing risk and still earning good investment dollars. And so lots of different things have showed up in the last 5 to maybe 10 years that I would not expect someone who's later in life or later in their careers to be really savvy in. but at least they can listen. And so the message for the leading gen is to open your mind to the possibilities that what you did in the beginning of starting your business, or what you did when you took over from your parents or aunts and uncles, just may not be the wave of the future. And we may need to design a new approach to capture market share or to grow the investment portfolio, or to your point, simply to diversify and maintain the investment portfolio. So millennials get a bad rap for wanting more time off and wanting to go snowboarding, or not working very hard. The reality is they've just blended work and life into one thing. And so you'll see millennials on their iPads on the couch from 10 o'clock tonight until midnight. They might be watching some TV on their Netflix streaming account, but they're actually doing work, or they're thinking about the future. And so I think it's helpful to be, to your point, more positive, more appreciative of the different skills people bring to this, the different approaches that the generations have.
I completely agree. And the elders bring a sense of experience, having been through troubled times, know that things go up and things go down, to be cool and calm. And that's wonderful. And that's one of our advantages as we get a little bit older, I hope, as long as we keep on learning. But there's tremendous advantages in the youth and their exuberance, and the fact that sometimes they don't know what they don't know. And how that could, when the world's being turned upside down, be an advantage. And you mentioned the advent of technology, of the internet, of just so much going on with impact investing. And what else has changed radically in the last 12 years, and we're starting to cover this a lot now, is cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Old people like me, what's this? It's built upon sand. Well, our money is backed by the faith of the federal government. That's not backed by gold. That's built on faith and trust too. Everything is changing, everything. And there's going to be some great ideas that the young ones could bring to the business. Some of it may work and some of it won't. Like, how do you hedge that risk? How do you put some money behind it? We have one family, bringing up the issue you brought up before about, well, you must graduate from a degree in this or that. There are some people I've had on, brilliant people and entrepreneurs, that say that they think the world of education will be completely flipped, if not right now, in the next, 5, 10, 15 years. In this example, the person was a young, talented technologist, hacker, and gifted on digital marketing. What you just said, how someone can make millions of dollars by being a YouTube star or learning how to leverage technology, Instagram, LinkedIn. Your family business would absolutely benefit from that. The days of postcards, like you said, don't work anymore. And maybe that person would be better educated, not in a traditional college, but something like a General Assembly or something that's focused on digital marketing and tech. I think the families can't be overly rigid, just times are changing. Even though people like me are used to doing things a certain way, I think we have to be open-minded to adapt. And I have to admit, damn it, it's hard.
Well, and we live in the Internet of Things now, right, Angelo? So whether it is my home, electricity is being monitored by someone to know when I'm likely using, different appliances or devices at home, or shift to any other example. We are so connected. The research that would have taken you, hours to pour through volumes of encyclopedias before, I have it at my fingertips within 2 seconds. And so if we have a
key word, everyone has that at their fingertips.
Absolutely. Yeah. All it takes is a device that looks like this, or the computers that we're on. And so there's so much power available to us now that I don't expect leading gens who are still, for the most part, owning our companies and developing our investment strategy in the family offices to necessarily gravitate towards, without at least a gentle, if not a very strong push. But our next gens, and especially millennials who are coming out of college now and trying to find their place in the workplace, or digital natives beyond. I mean, my children are 19 and 21. They're both in college. They still know how to use that device I just held up in ways that I will never even imagine. So if we, again, appreciate the different skill sets, we can honor where people come from and their experiences and the sort of history and institutional knowledge, but also recognize that some new strategies and tactics may be appropriate as we move forward.
Given today's COVID conditions, what specifically can our families, what could they do to strengthen their interconnection with one another?
It's a really good question, especially this year with what we all have been through. And I'll go back to something I shared earlier. It's the values. It's the legacy conversation. What matters most to us? Many of us, I will talk about being a type A driven male without getting gender biased, but I relate to a lot of the CEOs I support who are also male, type A driven people who are sort of groomed to grow their businesses. Our energy is make it bigger and stronger so that we can make more money. And that isn't necessarily what's most important right now. What's important is being connected to your family. So many of my CEO clients are asking the question, Jeremy, I think I'm a great CEO. I think I'm doing a good job growing our business, but I'm not sure I'm a very good husband, or I'm not sure I'm a very good father. What do I do? And so answering your question, it goes back to the basics. It's simple pleasures. Right now, most of us are not traveling like I am a little bit. Most of us are much closer to home. We have that extra time of not commuting if we're not going into an office. And so walk the dogs with your significant other at 4 o'clock in the afternoon while you still have a little bit of sunshine left. Prioritize family dinner, even if it's once or twice a week. Most sort of, I won't call them workaholics, but work-focused, leaders tend to be in the business most evenings until later hours. So find those different traditions and rituals that you can prioritize now as a family to come together. I've got clients who are talking about a new balanced scorecard. It's not just about corporate objectives. Now it's about me, my self-health, right? Am I exercising? Am I freeing my mind of stress? It's about partnership and that relationship. Is it a loving and intimate one, or is it a very distanced emotionally one? The parent-child relationship, which by the way, goes the other direction. My mother shared with us yesterday, she just broke her foot. And so it's not just about, am I a good father? It's, am I a good son for my mother, who thankfully will be just fine. But again, it's those life circumstances you want to consider your generation before you as well as the one following you. And so I share the wheel of life with my clients to be thinking about that holistic view of life. It's not just my work and my work goals. It's everything else. And I know in our family, earlier this summer, we prioritized dinners and then movie night most nights when things were a little less stressful. I'm traveling again, and so it might be a weekend activity that's game night. But everyone has their own sort of traditions of being together and prioritizing that time. One of the best examples I heard, and I attribute this to you, in an FOA event that I attended. Everything feels like last year, right? But it was probably 2 years ago at this point. Most of us who have been in significant relationships for any period of time have heard of date night. My wife and I love date night whenever we can prioritize that. How many of us have ever prioritized daddy-daughter date night, or mother-son date night, or whatever your relationships might be? And so while you have this precious time with your children home or back home again, right? Because many of them are working virtually and are coming back home to be close to family. Prioritize date night in different ways so that you really get that one-on-one quality time to have the conversations and hang out and find out what is most important to them, and also share, meaningfully from your own place of what brings you joy and what makes you smile.
Very, very well said. Jeremy, we often hear from matriarchs addressing the volatile and emotionally charged dynamics in their families. For the patriarchs who are listening, what can men do to embrace these family solutions and demonstrate, and a key word here, more vulnerability, and ultimately enhance their communications? That's always the key, and relationships with their families.
Yeah, thank you. I just alluded to this, and life does happen through communication. It comes through our relationships. If I'm stressed out at work and I bring that to my family, which, by the way, I may not have a commute anymore. I may not have that 45 minutes or an hour of transition time. When I say bring it home from work, that might mean leaving my desk in the study, going to the dinner table. And so people need to find ways to create that space to be present. I think that's true for a lot of men in particular who may not have the same sort of emotional intelligence or EQ factor that our female partners do. Mm-hmm. And so I'm recommending a lot of strategies around self-health and sort of reflecting on what matters most to you as an individual, to my clients, especially those who are male. But the daddy-daughter night is an example of really being more connected, not assuming my wife is going to make dinner, right? Just because I happen to be married to a wife who is at home, I can make dinner and stop early. Wednesday night could be, husband makes dinner for wife and family, or we have caterers in our area who can't cater events anymore. So they're doing home delivery of incredible meals at half the cost of a restaurant. So it's prioritizing that time together. In some cases, my wife and I will cook together. But really, I do think vulnerability is the key word there. It's about not just prioritizing wealth generation through the business or the family office. It's about being present so we don't miss these sort of cherished moments with our children who are growing too fast, with our children who are back home as young professionals, with our parents who are aging, right? It's up to us. And I would say, whatever's happened in the past, I love my father dearly. He's a wonderful human being and a great presence in my life. He doesn't have the highest EQ. When we have conversations, he's not the most socially connected person. And that isn't meant to be a criticism, it's just an observation of how he lives his life. I don't have to live in the past and judge him for that. I can appreciate him for his values and what he brings into my life. And I can choose to be different. So I'd offer for anyone, matriarchs or patriarchs, choose to be different, choose to have things go in a different way. This year has taught us so much and such a powerful perspective on what matters. And if what matters is your familial connections, then check out of work a few hours early, a couple days a week, or prioritize that time on the weekend when you're available to be with your family, whatever generation it is you want to connect with. In my case, my children are going to school away from home, so it's going to be that phone call or FaceTime as often as we can have them. But really, it's about getting away from the work goals and creating other life goals that are around self-health, around family connection, around relationship and partnership that not all of us, and I can just own as one male, oftentimes forget about.
That's fantastic, Jeremy. And before I get to my next question, just a brief comment. I hope people really listen deeply into that answer, because we're talking about what families of great wealth, given who we are at Family Office Association, and nothing that you said, from making dinner to a movie night, to walking the dog, to FaceTime, to more interactivity now during COVID we have with our family, has anything to do with money. Especially for a wealthy family, when that sometimes is too easy of an out. Let me buy my son a $150,000 car. Pre-COVID, let him travel Europe and here's 40,000. I mean, those are great experiences if you have the right relationship and people are grounded. I'm not discounting that at all. But the things that you're talking about are the things that take some level of emotional intelligence, vulnerability, and time. They don't cost a penny. And I think that's the charm of them.
And I'll share for everyone listening today, joining us live. If you have not read the book, 5 Languages of Love by Chapman and White, I encourage you to do that for your family. For those of us who are business owners, when we work in business, we typically don't talk about love at work. So they adapted the book last year in 2019 around the 5 languages of appreciation. And to your point, Angelo, not all of us want to be appreciated in the same way. My wife might love flowers, and if I leave flowers for her every Monday morning, she has a great week and she knows I love her. That isn't necessarily the case for everyone. Maybe my wife doesn't want me to kill the environment and ruin all these plants. She'd rather I simply hold her hand every morning before I go to work and say, I love you, thank you so much for everything you do for me. And when I come home, not have work scowl on my face, but hold that same hand and say, I love you, how was your day? Tell me everything that you did, right? So everyone's a little bit different. It's not a one size fits all. I can buy you a Maserati and you'd say why I drive a Prius and want to support the environment. I could give you a candy bar and say, this is a sweet gesture for me. And you'd say, I'm diabetic. And right. So we really do need to figure out what matters most individually and then appreciate people in those ways that they feel loved and supported by us, whether they are employees or our family members, whether they're husbands and wives or children or anything else.
One of the things that I've been talking about for years, given my experiences with families and the work that I do with them, is the fact of helping to educate or teach the next or the rising generation from stewardship to being grounded to their ethics, their internal morals. And I don't know if there's a better tool among these families than what I'm going to talk about next. And that's not all families are prepared to start a foundation or commit millions to charity, but talk about the value of family philanthropy and how it brings families closer together. Let's even ignore the education aspect, just the human element of being closer together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'll give you one great example. I know of a family that technically live on the Nevada side of the border, but sort of let's call it Northern California. They do have a foundation. They do have family philanthropies that they support. But what matters most to me is they get their younger children. We're talking, late single digits, 8, 9-year-olds up to young teens, 12, 14-year-olds. They get them involved in community service and philanthropy.
Yeah.
How? Well, you drive down any freeway in this country and you're probably going to see a homeless person the minute you exit begging for money and support. They have granola bars and power bars in their car that they hand out to them as a gesture rather than free money, but really a way of helping them sustain themselves and get back on their feet. Children see that from the back seat and they start asking questions. What are you doing, Mom? Dad, what was that you just did? And so that's a great way of instilling family values through, sort of a non-monetary philanthropic effort. Go to the other end of the spectrum, families who maybe don't have means, like one family I know of in the Pacific Northwest who grew up by the Puget Sound. This is a really significant family you'd know the name of. They're committed to water. And they believe if we can put clean water in every country throughout the world, we will solve a lot of problems. So they're committed to, that. Not all of us can afford to do that. And some of us want to be more mindful of our local communities. So whether your family supports the local pet shelter or getting, abused and battered women into a better home, whether it is supporting young children from inner city to get into school and have a different educational experience than they might otherwise, just that act of coming together to talk about what causes do we care about, and ask your children. There's no age that is too young. I know of one family in Los Angeles, they have their 4 through 8-year-olds, their 5 children, the younger generation. They say, pull out your iPads every year around Christmas time and say, okay, who are we going to contribute to? And maybe one child sees a pretty picture of a panda and they say they want to contribute to the pandas. Great. Maybe grandpa died of pancreatic cancer the year before, and they say, we want to honor grandpa's legacy around pancreatic cancer. Great. But whatever it is, they're getting to participate in philanthropy in that way. One of the ways that I say our family sort of grew up and not having the means to support, world hunger as a cause. My children knew if it was their birthday, they could get a new toy or a stuffed animal, fine. But any other time of year, if they said, hey, I want that, great. You need to do your chores to get that reward. You need to donate something that is in your room you haven't played with in a long time. So one panda in means one raccoon out type of an exchange. And so again, just sort of instilling those values about caring for others, not believing in a sense of entitlement that I can never have enough. There are others out there who need this, who can't afford it as well. And so even those small gestures can go a really long way to bringing families together. And again, especially right now where there's so much challenge and struggle out there, to offer this gift to the world and to the communities that we live in is incredibly powerful.
And Jeremy, as we wrap up, would you please share kind of one of the toughest family situations you ever faced with us? And what did that family do to address their strained relationships and become at least a higher performing family?
Yeah. It probably is a good question to end on. I mean, I've worked with all kinds of families. Everyone is uniquely different in some way, shape, or form. I remember some experiences last year and the beginning of this year where I had a family, the founder father had started the company 50, 60 years ago. And unfortunately, he passed far too young. And his former wife took over the business. That was wonderful for her to try to support the family and his legacy. But in doing so, there was strife with the stepdaughter, his natural daughter. She was a board member, and you can imagine the family governance that ensues. The son of the second wife became president of the company, so the stepbrother is now running the business in many ways. And so there's a lot of complexity, and they had philanthropy in place. They had what was a successful business. So you start looking at the pyramid. Business was pretty good. Philanthropy was pretty good. It really was the relationships that were struggling. And so we could get out of the past about what had happened to present day. I was able to do some interviews, talk to people, find their lighthouse and their shared values. And ultimately, we actually had a first ever board meeting and a family council session where I had the entire board in a room vote on something. After making a motion on something, they agreed on something. And never in that family's history had they had consensus on anything or made a joint decision. everything they'd always voted on was unanimous written consent, and people would either sign and agree, or if they didn't, the then CEO would just sort of decide what she wanted to do because she was majority shareholder. So, you can look at any one of the pillars, whether it's the business and the family office, the philanthropy and the foundation work, or really just back to relations. The more we get our families to focus on our relationships, let the past be in the past. The two brothers I mentioned earlier, who whatever they're, quarreling over today happened 40 years ago. And I've got plenty of those families where it's the extended relationships that have just gone apart, but they're tied back to the family office, they're tied back to the family business. And really is the communication, the relationship, and having people recognize sort of the humanity in each other rather than hold on to the grudges, from the past.
And I believe my final question, this year has been extremely difficult with many of us, and our families, whether we've been directly impacted by COVID-19 and, God forbid, lost loved ones or not. What final thoughts can you share with us to help everyone moving forward during the tough times? And I actually think to those that were seniors in high school and didn't have the classic end of school celebration, they might even be limited in terms of in college now, in a remote, plus depending on where they are in the country being there, and those just graduating, probably a terrible time to kind of be in the marketplace. So there's just so much going on. And I'm not even getting into the psychological impact of the loss of social interconnectivity among especially the younger people that need that are still experiencing who they are. It's times have been turned upside down.
Yeah, and everyone has their own experience of this. And I don't want to belittle the ultimate, which is many of us have lost loved ones to COVID. I'm an Angelino. I mean, we just had a world championship that no one really got to go and celebrate with the Dodgers winning because we can't be together. Yes, I mean, for the high school seniors of last year, my son is now a college senior this year. I mean, just all those life events that have been impacted by what's going on. I've said for months now, Angelo, just be kind to yourselves. We really need to change the bar of expectations. Good enough may be so much better than good enough these days. It may be great, it may be phenomenal. For me, when it comes to self-care and self-health, I'm very fortunate. I live by the beach. When I just have too much stress and I need to sort of gain some composure back, I go walk my dogs at the beach. And most mornings, if I go at the right time, my dolphins swim by. And I do call them my dolphins. I know that they don't think they are, but they absolutely impact my life in very meaningful and powerful ways. And so whatever that is for you, all of our listeners, find your one thing, that one thing that gets you grounded, that one thing that puts a smile back on your face. It could be the family dinners every night. It could be going for a run. Maybe it's just a drive, right? But whatever it is to find your space, I think now more than ever, we all need sort of that self-health focus, that self-care. And I'm not talking about losing 20 pounds. I'm not talking about one more push-up. For some of us, it might be that glass of scotch at night, or it might be one more burger during the day. But whatever it is, those simple pleasures are so much more meaningful now. And that's sort of the individual within us. We can extend that to our immediate family. What a gift that is. If we can send that to our employees, whether in our family office or our businesses, again, what a gift that is for them, because everyone is struggling in one way or another, some more, sort of, dire situations than others experience, but everyone just needs that sort of moment of self-care and healing, and to sort of get through this with some resilience and getting grounded in what matters most.
Wow. This has been really fantastic. In a second, I'm going to, for those that want to learn more about your amazing work, how they could learn more about you and how they could contact you. But while I have you here now, I would like to kind of read a little bit of a special announcement that we're very excited about, kind of to continue the conversations like this, heading towards the year ahead, especially. I'm excited to announce that with Dr. Lurey's support, FOA, Family Office Association, is launching a new Family Office Roundtable Forum program. I'll tell you a little bit about it. This exciting new program will provide the foundation for our members to build strong, supportive relationships with one another so they can address their greatest challenges and more personal concerns that you sometimes it's difficult to discuss even with family members or trusted advisors. The good news is you're not alone, trust me, and you're probably facing very similar challenges and opportunities as others that are family office leaders. Your effectiveness as a family leader, though, depends on addressing these important issues with are both challenges and opportunities. Don't forget that, very quickly and being very complete. That's why we've created this invitation only group coaching, as I'm calling it, and peer support just for you. Keep an eye for details. It'll come to your inbox soon in the weeks to follow, or contact either of us, meaning me, and I'll give my contact info for the end. And that's a good segue for Dr. Lurey to kind of give a little bit of his information, how you could learn more and how you could contact him. But we're excited about this. Let's call it a partnership. I'm a big fan and supporter of Dr. Lurey, and it's an honor for me to be involved with him in this perspective. We're fine-tuning some of the value added that's going to bring to my members, my corporate partners, my relationships. And again, if you just are static during COVID-19, you're going to get old very quickly. It's all going to disappear. Everything is changing, and we need to change with the times and do more and more that's going to be applicably of benefit to my members and my relationships. So we're excited about that, Dr. Lurey. And please, how could people learn more about you, your company, your practice, and how could they reach out?
Sure. Thanks, Angelo. I was a member of a CEO group for a number of years. I've been leading CEO groups for the past many years. And I mean, these group coaching programs are so powerful to bring people together and create relationships beyond our families and our core businesses. So thank you for the opportunity to support FOA's members with a similar type of a roundtable leadership forum. For anyone who'd like more information on that, or just want to talk with me about what you're going through, feel free to email me at jslurey@familylegacyfirst.com. And that is with a 1, so familylegacy1st.com. We actually have two different sides of our business. In the family legacy and governance space, www.familylegacyfirst.com will give you more information about that division. And on the other side of really being in the businesses and helping our CEO clients grow their multi-generation family businesses, CHIEFEXECcoach is the name of that division. So www.chiefexeccoach.com. We'll have more information for you and lots of videos and some other resources that I invite you all to go read and review.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. And in giving my close, I really enjoyed the conversation today. These are such important topics, and I feel like I learned so much from preparing for it to listening to the good doctor and others, and hopefully more interaction from you that are live as well. So what's top of your mind, I could learn from the great responses from some of the experts that we have on. I mean, trust me, I love things like investing in taxes. It's some of the key work that I do with families around global wealth preservation. And that's a lot of fun, but you need the foundation of governance, how decisions are made, understand the tribal nature of families, communication, and a lot of the issues that we discussed today, or none of that other stuff is going to matter. If anything, worst case, it all just kind of disappears after you die, and your legacy, which is more than just your money, unfortunately, could often go to waste. And there's nothing that could bring that back, no amount of money in the world. On that note, everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of the Angelo Robles Podcast. I'm the founder and CEO of Family Office Association. We're a global membership organization dedicated to families of wealth and their single family offices, providing a significant amount of original proprietary content, hosting global digital programs, but hundreds of them, like practically every day over the year, and interviewing amazing people like Dr. Lurey and so many others that we've had on and are scheduled to come on. It's been really engaging and in many ways deeper and more thoughtful than sometimes the fast pace of physical events and speaker after speaker after speaker. So again, there are advantages. We offer a significant amount of master classes to our members and selectively to outside relationships as a one-off purchase, I guess you could say, and consulting to families often around creating or reinventing their family office. Check us out on social media. We're Family Office on YouTube. Go and subscribe. It's free. We're active on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. You could find me. And our website is familyofficeassociation.com. My email is angelo@familyofficeassociation.com. Jeremy, thanks for being a great guest. Look forward to working with you much more, obviously, in the future, as we have lots of things to roll up our sleeves and do, and look forward to the next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Angelo. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.